Okay, so this game looks and plays fantastic on the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 after the 60 FPS update.
I prefer the cinematic feeling in 24 frames.
Sorry, what?
24 frames per second is enough.
For what? For Barbie's Horse Adventure on the PlayStation 2?
The human eye can't see more than 25 frames per second.
No, Tony, no, that's not correct. Where do you get your information?
That's what my dad told me, and he was always right.
Yeah, not in this case, Tony, not in this case.
Are you saying my dad lied to me?
Okay, look, Tony, I will explain this to you later, okay? Let us continue with the video, okay?
Okay, boss.
Okay, so let's try this again. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel Amok for All. Tomb Raider on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, 4K 60 FPS. But today we are not here because of the 60 FPS update.
Why are we here today, boss?
HDR, Tony, we are here because of HDR.
What is HDR, boss?
Are you listening to anything what I'm saying in my videos?
Not really, boss.
Okay, it really looks to me that I need to do more training with my stuff. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different video. Today I like to talk about Tomb Raider from 2018. Just recently, or a couple of days ago, received a patch 4K 60 FPS update on both consoles, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And it looks fantastic. I have to say, it looks fantastic. I was really surprised that this game is from 2018. I mean, yeah, you can see maybe textures are not perfect and so on, but the overall impression from this game, wow. And I have to play it. I have to say it, I really need to play it because first 10 minutes, first 20 minutes or whatsoever from this game, amazing. But anyway, so today's topic, HDR10 versus Dolby Vision. And of course we're talking about HGiG when we're talking about HDR10 and of course dynamic tone mapping. Yeah, it really looks great. Okay, so let's start talking about the internal HDR calibration menus on both consoles, Xbox Series X and in this case right now the PlayStation 5. So I haven't found any evidence when you change something here that something is changing in the game. It really doesn't matter. There's no difference in terms of brightness, contrast, colors or whatsoever. It really doesn't matter what you set up here, but of course I always recommend choose the mode what you like to play with and set this up in the correct way, because otherwise you have in games of course where this menu is supported a wrong HDR of course. So what I also found, and that's a little bit disappointing, yeah, it's disappointing actually, when you start the game in HDR or Dolby Vision you will have raised black levels, which means you have to decrease actually the brightness settings, and on my LG CX the standard brightness setting is 50. You have to decrease this to 49 to get the perfect OLED black back. Not a nice thing, but also not a deal breaker in my opinion. Okay, so let's start talking about HDR10 on the PlayStation 5, and I compared of course HDR10 on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and I couldn't find any difference. So that's why I'm using HDR10 on the PlayStation 5 and later on we're talking about Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X. So and what I have to say, first of all, this game in HDR looks a little bit washed out. I have to admit it, it's not the best HDR implementation in a game, and it's not a game where you actually can show off HDR in my opinion. There are way better games out there, but don't get me wrong, it's still better than SDR because you have a much wider dynamic range in terms of brightness and the colors are more punchy, more realistic in my opinion. But anyway, so let's talk about my settings because I like to make it very quick because HGiG, HGiG is very dark, full stop. Let's say like this, okay? When you play in dynamic tone mapping, it is much more pleasant for your eyes, I have to say it. So even with all the disadvantages from dynamic tone mapping, it is just better, okay? So I played a lot with the settings here and I have to say something, and I need to be careful. Even you play in HDR and you turn this off, you find your SDR settings suddenly. Those settings affecting also the HDR picture. Okay, so what you set here and you change it back to on, it will also change the picture. Okay, so you need to be very careful. So what I have done here is, and again, it was very, very hard because you have very different levels. So in the very beginning, this one here is the cave. Yeah, I would say it like this, and it's very, very dark. So I started with HGiG as always because HGiG is my preferred HDR10 mode, but I have to say in this case I would really probably play in dynamic tone mapping over HGiG. But again, it's, yeah, with all the disadvantages from dynamic tone mapping, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so what I found is, and just keep in mind, this, I haven't played the whole game. So when I'm doing testing, I can't play the whole game and make sure that the HDR settings actually are correct. But what I found in the very beginning from the game, when I'm changing the internal brightness from SDR to here under the O, and then we change the spec, and also the brightness in HDR under the O, so don't touch luminance or whatsoever, and this is for HGiG by the way at the moment, then it is not too bad. Okay, but still I would need to play in a complete dark room because it is just missing the punch. I hope you get my point. So on the other hand, when you like to play with dynamic tone mapping, which it's just better in my opinion. Unfortunately, I have to say, and I'm a big fan from HGiG, but if you like to play in dynamic tone mapping, then make sure everything is set to standard. Okay, everything should be set to standard because otherwise you will start losing fine details in very bright objects, and then I have to say the HDR elements are really popping out. Okay, so really, really nice, and the brightness is also not too bad. It is playable now, in my opinion, much better than HGiG. Okay, so HDR second part, and you know me, I don't want to spoiler too much, but I have to show you a couple of things, and I was really actually, yeah, this level was great. This is the very beginning from the game, so you're not actually, yeah, I'm not spoiling too much, and I really like this part because you have so many nice lights and you can compare this so great with HGiG and dynamic tone mapping. And again, HGiG without the changed settings, it is just too dark in my opinion. There's really something missing. So let me just change this back. This looks much better, much better, and it is playable with this brightness actually. But again, compared to dynamic tone mapping, and of course now it's a little bit unfair because we need to set this back, so it's very hard to compare. And I actually tried to take some pictures, but because it's so dark, the game, my camera, and I need to, actually it's my fault because I don't know actually to take proper picture with my Panasonic GH5S, because the camera is more than capable of doing proper pictures. But I was really struggling to show you in pictures the difference between the modes, really, because of this very dark picture. It's very hard. Anyway, really, even in this level where I easily I can play in HGiG with the recommend or with my changed settings, I would just recommend leave everything on standard and just play in dynamic tone mapping, because can you see this, how much more brighter this is and how the colors are more popping in dynamic tone mapping? This is a very big difference. So this game is just really not made, in my opinion, for HGiG. Okay, so let's jump to Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X, and I really love it. I really love it because it is playable and it is better than, in my opinion, HDR10 with dynamic tone mapping and HGiG. So what Dolby Vision is doing better, as in other games what I already found, is it shows you more details in very bright objects. But of course, when we're talking about bright objects like this, or especially this here, and I measured this one in all the different modes. So in dynamic tone mapping, I measured 660 candela, which was the highest brightness, and in HGiG and in Dolby Vision I measured 635 candela. You can see a little bit of a difference, but what I found is in Dolby Vision, even you have a lower brightness, you can clearly see more details, and this is through the whole game so far as I played. Okay, so also when it comes to the brightness, because I can actually use this setting, and I will show you this. First of all, the SDR setting on the Xbox Series X, I haven't touched it. This is still the standard. Below the R, before the E starts, both sliders to the standard. But when we're talking about enable HDR settings, I changed all the sliders completely to the right side, because you can do this with Dolby Vision. It's a complete different, how should I say, approach what Dolby Vision is doing. Can you actually see this? How long does it take? So on HDR10 and with HGiG and so on, this is the end where you can't see the symbol anymore. I hope my camera can still catch this. But here I can actually still see some little spots, and now it's almost gone. And then I decided, hey, just go to the complete right side. And the same with the brightness. I haven't found any problems with cranking up the brightness on the slider in-game like crazy, because it is just perfect. You may be losing a little bit details, but compare to, and here we are with HDR10 and dynamic tone mapping. Just let me walk here. So yeah, this is much brighter, or not much brighter, 30 candles brighter than on the Xbox, but this is just one big bright spot. And on the Xbox, I actually can see that there's a nice glow around, and I have some details. It looks like there's a stone or whatever this is, or maybe it's the sun or whatever, but I have actually nice details here, and the brightness level is really nice. I can't complain actually to play this game in Dolby Vision with these settings in terms of brightness. I have to say, in both modes, HDR10 and Dolby Vision, this game looks a little bit washed out, full stop. It's not the best HDR implementation, I have to say. But Dolby Vision, as in other games so far, and I found games, of course, there where Dolby Vision is not doing any difference, but here in this game, it's doing a better job. And yes, I'm aware of that this game is not mastered or rendered in Dolby Vision, but that doesn't mean it will do a better job than HDR10, because it looks just better to me. Okay, so here's another example why I think Dolby Vision is doing a little bit of a better job in this game. Even it's not supported natively, but so let's have a focus on the lights from this truck. And this at the moment is Dolby Vision, and when we change this to HDR10, and as always it's very hard to compare this because I'm not looking at the same direction at this very moment, so it will change, of course, the brightness and the appearance from the light and the colors. But what I found is in many situations that it looks that Dolby Vision is a little bit more colorful over HDR10, but this is something what we need to consider. So my TV, of course, is calibrated in the Dolby Vision gaming mode and also in the HDR gaming mode, but we're still talking about two different inputs here. Okay, we're still talking about two different consoles, so it can be that the color difference is not coming because Dolby Vision is doing a better job. It's just maybe because there's a difference because of the Xbox or because of the input or whatsoever. Okay, we need to consider this. It is very hard actually to say Dolby Vision is doing a much better job. Not in this game, not at all, but I would still recommend Dolby Vision because there's no disadvantage over dynamic tone mapping, because what we have with dynamic tone mapping is always the changing of the brightness. And if you're new to my channel, then I will explain what I mean. Dynamic tone mapping is analyzing the screen the whole time. Dynamic tone mapping. So, and it will decide what is the best in terms of HDR. So, and in most of the cases, when we're just talking about a still picture, dynamic tone mapping is doing a great job, in my opinion. But when we're playing games, when we're watching movie, we're not talking about a still picture. So what we have here right now, HGiG, dynamic tone mapping, you can see there's a big difference in terms of brightness, a big difference. So when we go closer here, Let me just make sure that this is very, very bright. And now we're changing this. There is less difference. Still difference because it's not bright enough, because I can't get it that bright that dynamic tone mapping is actually thinking, hey, I don't need to do anything. But can you see there's less difference? So, and this is what I don't like in, dynamic tone mapping, because now we are here, dynamic tone mapping is on, and what dynamic tone mapping did, over brighten the picture, not over brighten, but adjusting the picture. So right now HGiG or dynamic tone mapping off as well is showing you the brightness, what is really the correct brightness from HDR. But of course, because there is no bright object on the screen, dynamic tone mapping will brighten it up. And this is happening all the time. And the problem is it can take up to 6 seconds to adjust the screen. So now just imagine you're walking around, you're running around, and dynamic tone mapping is all the time adjusting the screen. So you never end up with the right brightness. That's a fact, okay? So that's why I really don't like dynamic tone mapping. But in this game, again, if you can't play in Dolby Vision, dynamic tone mapping in HDR10 is the way to go. Okay, so time to end this video. Time for a resume. Oh no, wrong button. Wrong button. Yeah. Okay, change to the. That's the advantage when you have two consoles. You just continue here, and you play Dolby Vision now. So, okay, my recommendation: if you play this game on the Xbox Series X or S and you can play in Dolby Vision, I would really say that's the way to go with these settings here. Just show it again. So make sure the SDR settings are in standard, and then increase all the two sliders to the rightest side, and you're good to go with Dolby Vision. It really makes a big difference. So if you can't do it, if you have to play the game in HDR10, which I can show you here on the PlayStation 5, then I would recommend dynamic tone mapping, and do not change anything in the settings here. Not in SDR, not in HDR, just leave it, change the mode to dynamic tone mapping, and you're good to go. If you like to play this game in HGiG in a very dark room, and this is what I would recommend, then make sure you change the SDR brightness to below the O, turn HDR back on, and also do this with the HDR brightness, okay? So then, because then you end up with a higher brightness, much better HDR picture. But now, of course, a little bit too much, because we're still in dynamic tone mapping. You can see this is now over brighten. But anyway, so that's my recommendation for this game. And it's still, I mean, this is a 2018 game, and it looks fantastic in my opinion. And I never played this game on the Xbox or PlayStation before. I played it on PC, and of course in 4K, 120 frames per second is a really nice game. But this is a new experience. Of course, 60 FPS is the way to go in a game like this. And the optic is fine. What do you think? Just put in a comment what you think, of course, about this game, about my settings, about my recommended settings. And also, of course, if you're new to my channel, do me a big favor and subscribe to my channel. I would much appreciate it. So also put some recommendations, not recommendation, but maybe requests in the comments, what you like to see next, what games, because I would test any game. It doesn't matter if it's an old game or whatsoever, because it really doesn't matter, because even a 2018 game, oopsie, is worth to replay it in my opinion. So what I'm doing here now, okay. And this is why I love Tomb Raider, because so many things to do. Anyway, okay, I think that's enough for this video. I say thank you very much for watching me. Don't forget to subscribe, okay, and I see you guys next time. Bye.